Today's show is Dukes of Hazzard while I do these other videos. Today, Sabbath Day FRAUD. Fraud. Princess Bride, if you don't catch on to where I got that from. So, Sabbath Day FRAUD. Blasphemy! You're violating God's day! I am going to demonstrate to you that it is not God's day. That's the fraud. Okay, so Sabbath, where did it come from?
Oh, well, it's in our religion that started at a certain period in time and has always been the law of God.
How far back does your religion go? Does it go back to Adam?
Of course it does.
No, it doesn't. If you're Christian, you go back to Constantine. If you're Jewish, you sort of have genealogical ties, but the religion itself, sorry, goes back to Babylon. And Islam, Muhammad. That's the newest of the religions. So, yeah, you guys aren't going back far enough. And so, yeah, the Sabbath day is in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, and everybody thinks, oh, that was written by Adam or Moses and blah, blah, blah. No. The current Bible that we have today was the earliest documents are the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's around the time of zero, but there is no 0 year, but there are problems. We do not have an original biblical text. However, my theory says we do. We just haven't translated it. They've been right before us this whole time, and the particular scholars in that particular field who have done the work on those have not been making the connection. I'm the one who made the discovery, and I've done other videos to show you how it works. And so the Sabbath day is not the original intention from the Bible. And I will go over the history and show you how the Bible isn't. The Hebrew Bible that we have was created by the Masoretes starting in 800 AD, so that's after Muslims, and went to 1000 AD when they worked on it, and that had been the most original text until the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and then the Dead Sea Scrolls just coincidentally corresponded mostly with the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible. And it's understood from other recorded records, documents, that there had been earlier documents. They just don't exist. And so we have to understand that just because we have a Bible currently doesn't mean that it's the exact same text as what other documents say existed earlier. There's no way to confirm that because we don't have the text. And so yes, you'd have to discover the original source documents and I'll just tell you, it's the Egyptian documents. Those are the original source documents for the Bible. And unless you know, if you don't know that, you're never going to figure it out. You're just going to trust that the current Bible we have is 100% accurate. And yes, there are Christian groups that say the Bible is the Word of God exactly as written, even though they don't go back to the original language. They use their English translation as the correct Word of God, as if God had written it in English way back when. Dumb, dumb, dumb. And so I also hope you understand that our current calendar system, where our Sabbath is on Sunday, the first day of the week, of a 7-day week, also did not exist at the time of Moses, let alone the time of Adam. And then, of course, you know the Jews celebrate their Sabbath on Saturday, the 7th day of the week, which ties into their creation story account as to their justification for it. And we'll get to that in a second here as I pause.
A pit of despair.
That's the Princess Bride reference I was referring to earlier. Okay, so yes, the calendar has not always been as we have it now. When you interpret older documents, older cultures, older societies by our current standards, our current practices, our current beliefs, you're going to misinterpret. You're going to make errors. You can't do that. So let's demonstrate how to do actual research. Now I'm going to take you to the Wikipedia entry on the Sabbath. It is incomplete, and they don't make any conclusions. They don't make the connections. They treat it according to everybody's different beliefs, and that messes everything up. And so even though Wikipedia wants to be fair and neutral and honest and truthful, they're not doing a very good job. However, it indicates, of course, that it originates from the Genesis chapter 2. And that's under the assumption that the Bible is taken from an original source document back to Adam. And so we're left to assume that Adam had a 7-day week given to him by God. Not the case.
Here, Flipper.
Raw fish. I need to find that punk song from Dr. Demento's show. If anybody knows it, please comment on what it is and how to find it. Because I know I got the fish heads and I got other Dr. Demento stuff, but I can't find that samurai eat raw fish and Flipper talking on there. I can't find that one. It's a hilarious song. Great memories from the 80s. Anyway, Sabbath. I just ramble here. They don't get to the point. Their contents are better at summarizing things. Okay, so the Bible as we have it today. How did it get written? When did it get written? Because, guess what? The separate books in the Bible, the Old Testament, were written by different people at different times. And they were all compiled together into one collection. And so that was done by the Masoretes, 800. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation, which was done according to documented accounts, though we have no original source, was after 300, when the Greeks took over the world and Hellenized everybody. The Jews were speaking the lingua franca of the Greeks, and so they needed a Bible, a Torah, a Pentateuch. There's a difference between Pentateuch and Septuagint and Torah, but they needed scripture in their language, and this is when it began to be written. Was post-Babylonian captivity. And that's key to making the connection. The Bible, we assume, according to other people's documents, was written post-captivity of Babylon. So around after 300, most likely in 200 BC. And so that's many millennia after the original events took place. And so how did it come to be written then? Did they have original source documents from which they just rewrote it into the biblical form? Sort of. There's this place in Egypt called Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria specifically. They specifically went out throughout the world collecting all documents. They'd bring them to Alexandria and they'd make a copy of them. And apparently they didn't return the originals that they took. But Alexandria became a scholar's paradise. Everybody came to Alexandria to do their research and study. And so that's where the Bible was written. And if you've heard anything about Alexandria, the Christians were the first ones to burn the documents, and then Muslims burned them. So, yay to censorship. Yes, Christians. But Christians are of God. No, they're not. And so that's where the Bible was written. And what else do you have in Alexandria, Egypt? You have Egyptian documents. And so scholars think that they've figured out how the Bible originated and came up with their documentary hypothesis, which has now been proven to be bunk, but still there are a few holdouts who cling to it. But when I took biblical studies, Thomas Robinson taught us all about the documentary hypothesis, as if that was legitimate. I did my own research and found, no, that's not right. There's something else going on. And sure enough, having studied Paleo-Hebrew and studying Egyptian, I learned how the Bible was created. The biblical writers went to the Egyptian documents and compiled them into a narrative using their ancestral names in their language to tell the story. So Adam and Eve originated as Nut and Geb, and Cain and Abel, Seth and Osiris. You notice that Adam and Eve's third child, and it's not third child, they had many more, but the replacement for Abel was also named Seth. Not a coincidence. And so then you get to Genesis chapter 2. How did the Egyptians, or Egyptian documents, have a 7-day week? They didn't. Which means that the biblical author utilized a different source document to develop a 7-day week. And that's where making the connection with the evidence to draw a theory conclusion. In the Wikipedia page, it goes over the biblical Sabbath, trusting that the scriptural document is an original source document. But then they go into Judaism, and Christianity, and then Islam, and then they get to other religions. And the old ones on this are Buddhist and Zoroastrianism, and which comes, it's a Persian development, or shortly thereafter, or at the end of it. And then they have Babylonian, and they don't make the connection as Babylon being the oldest source for a Sabbath day. And they don't call it a Sabbath, they have it as rest days. But Babylon is Semitic, and in the Semitic it's Sabbath, or Sabbath, whatever you want to pronounce it as. My research indicates that the phonetics are dead to us, and we don't know the phonetics. And so we have to go by pictures to understand and interpret the language, or the communication that they were trying to express. So Babylon is the oldest source document for a Sabbath day. Remember, the author of the Bible is post-Babylonian captivity. Babylon is the oldest source document for the Sabbath. You making the connection as I have? Do I need to actually explain it? You know, like in jokes, if you have to explain your joke, it's no longer funny. So, yeah, Babylon is the source for the Genesis chapter 2 of a seventh day. And that's what I discovered, is that the biblical text is not a documentary hypothesis of an Elohist text, a Yahwist text, a priestly text, a Deuteronomic text, etc. Instead, it's the merging of Egyptian source documents and Babylonian source documents. And that's just in the Torah. But it also is found in other of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, such as the book of Esther. Esther comes from the Babylonian goddess Ishtar. And that's where we get Easter. Mordecai is Marduk. So, yeah, the book of Esther is a Babylonian story retold by a Jewish editor, turning the Babylonian names into Jewish characters. or House of Israel characters, actually. And so there you go. Then you also have the story of Job, where the sons of God are going into the temple to worship God. That was not a Jewish practice. So it's obviously an older document, or referring to an older period of time where people performed rituals in the temple other than just sacrifices. And so, yeah, what's with the Babylon as a source? Did they actually have it as a holy day? Sort of. It was more of a fear-mongering day, because in the month, the 7th day of their 7-day week, which they are the origin for the 7-day week, so there you go. That's again why the Bible did it that way. But 7, 14, 21, and 28 of the month are the evil days, as they have in quotes here, meaning that the word for the particular days were referred to in their language as evil. And so it was a superstitious day. So the number 7, or the 7 roots, are days of superstition, that things are going to go bad on those days. And so they didn't perform any work because they didn't want to be cursed. So thus it was a day of rest. And thus it was holy, or set apart from the rest of the days of the week. And that's where the Jews got it from. You know, you have the story of Daniel that talks about Jewish boys going over and being faithful to the Jewish law, and standing up to the oppression of the Babylonians. And we will not conform to your culture, we will remain Jewish. I hate to tell Jews this, but they totally gave in to Babylonian culture and influence. And it's evidenced in the text of the Bible. Not just the Sabbath day, but our focus is on the Sabbath day. And so what about the Egyptians then? What about them? Well, they didn't really do the creation in day periods, or periods, time periods. It was just events, one event after the other. And that's represented with a petroglyph of Nut separated from Geb by their father Shu. And that's the separation of the heaven and the earth. And then came all of the life on earth after it rose from the waters. And the Egyptians had 2 different calendars, 3 technically, but 2 main ones: a religious calendar and a civil calendar, a government calendar. And the religious calendar is significant because we just celebrated the prophecy of the coming of Horus, as illustrated in all the Egyptian documents, of a total solar eclipse on their new year. And so that's very significant. and I go over that as well, but we're talking about the Sabbath. And so what did the Egyptians do? Were they just heathen pagans who were godless? No, of course they weren't godless. They had many gods. They had a family of gods that were involved in their main focus of everything that they did. All the other gods are minor in comparison. You have Osiris, who is the Jesus figure. Many people mess that up in the rising generation of scholars who are saying, oh, well, Horus is Jesus. No, no, no. Only because Jesus is a mixture of Horus and Osiris of the Egyptians. And that's where Christians need to understand that Jesus is to correspond with the Osiris figure, not the Horus figure. So all about Horus and his birth and his duel with Lucifer as he's out in the wilderness or in the desert for 40 days. All that is part of the Horus storyline. That was not a part of the Jesus Osiris storyline. And that's why the Jews don't believe in Jesus, because Jesus did not conform to the Horus symbolism, prophecy. And Jews don't understand that either, because they don't want to associate with Egyptian. That's taboo. They're evil. Bible tells me so. And we wrote the Bible to tell us that it tells us so. Tradition. Fiddler on the Roof. Great play. Great movie. It's a must watch. So that's basically it. I mean, the Egyptians, they had weeks separated out into 10, but they didn't name the days of the week. They named the days of the month, sort of, but it was more of a numbering according to the month. And but it was 3 weeks of 10 days, so 30 days in a month. And that was basically it. There was no Sabbath day. There was no day of rest. The Egyptians did not have good and evil as their concept. That was Babylon who created good and evil, and then the Zoroastrians through Persia picked it up and spread it wide. The Egyptians, you're thinking, well, yeah, but they have Set and Osiris, so Osiris was good and Set was bad. Well, yeah, murder is a bad thing, and when you're getting judged in the judgment scene in the temple, you have to say that you've not murdered anybody. And so in that sense, yes, you can be an immoral or unethical person, but Set himself was not the personification of evil in contrast to good. That was not a concept in the Egyptians. And everybody was accountable for themselves. And so the minor gods that you may know of, so if you're a farmer, you want to pray to the stewardship god of farming, whether it's planting or harvest. You pray to them so that the harvest can be good. And It's not really as if you're praying to a god, similar to Christians or Catholics praying to a saint for blessings for whatever the saint is over. But that's where the Catholics got it from. Originally, it was just a prayer to the main god, talking about having his steward over farming bless your crop, or you pray to the weather god to make sure that no storms happen. Those types of things. So it's a different concept, and Egyptologists don't fully grasp it. They're not putting the pieces together like the Wikipedia article here. But that's how you do research. You go back to the origin source, the first source that discusses the topic that you're researching, and then you plug in everything else after into that timeline chronology to see how things altered over time. So Christians got it from Constantine. Constantine got it from Jews. Jews got it from Babylon. So there you go. So there's no need to fear about shopping on Sunday or doing regular work on Sunday, because it's just a Babylonian holiday. It's meaningless. Remember, Babylon is the bad guys, and I think most religions have a warning against Babylon. And yet they practice the Sabbath, which was a Babylonian holiday. So there's a bit of hypocrisy there, but it's more of an ignorant hypocrisy. Okay, so there you go. Happy Babylon Sabbath. Babylonian Sabbath. So yeah, I don't bother with the Mormon Church, because it was the Campbellites that Signe Rigdon went to, and Signe Rigdon was an advocate of Sabbath day observance and sacrament on the Sabbath day. So that's for Mormons as to where your origins come from. So there you go. And the Campbellites were just a branch off of Christianity, which originated with Constantine. So now that you know, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to say, well, yeah, but God made it? Well, the Babylonian god, Ishtar, or Marduk, or Ishtar and Marduk. So figure it out, people, because that ain't God. Adam didn't have a Sabbath day. The house of Israel did not have a Sabbath day. Abraham did not have a Sabbath day. Noah did not have a Sabbath day. You know, in the Egyptians, every day was a religious holiday, a religious feast for each day of the year. And so people were able to worship any time they wanted, and not have a specific day set aside for it. And sacrament was when, usually during the harvest time, because that's when the crops grow, and you bring your food offerings and drink offerings to the temple. They give it to the priests. Priests present it before the god in the Holy of Holies, and that's where it's blessed. And then they give a portion back to the people who gave the offerings, and that's where our origin of sacrament comes from. So the Egyptians, Jesus did not establish the sacrament. So be careful when leaders of organizations try to tell you false historical information and claim that they are the source, or they know the source. That they're just lying to you to get money out of you, to control you and your behavior. And there you go. Now that you know, what are you going to do about it?